Document. Part for the evening air on Zelo 7 was cool and crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of alien flora that lined the pathways outside the council chambers. Daniel Harper walked alongside Rachel Myers, their footsteps echoing softly. Against the polished stone floor, the day's events had left him drained but restless, his mind replaying every moment, every word spoken in the chamber. He needed to clear his head to make sense of the whirlwind he had stepped into. Rachel seemed to sense his unease. "You're thinking too much," she said, her tone light but firm. "Take a break. You've earned it." "I can't help it," Daniel replied, running a hand through his hair. "Every time I think about what's at stake, it feels like the weight of the world is on my shoulders, literally." Rachel chuckled softly. "Well, maybe not just Earth this time. Try the galaxy." Her attempt at humor brought a fleeting smile, too. Daniel's face, but the tension remained. They reached a small garden area adjacent to the council building, its design blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. Strange plants with bioluminescent blooms cast a soft glow, illuminating. Winding paths and benches carved from smooth stone. The space was serene, almost otherworldly, yet familiar enough to offer comfort. As they sat down on one of the benches, Daniel noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Turning, he saw Kale, the reptilian ambassador, standing nearby. Vrin's green scales shimmered faintly under the artificial light, and his slit-like pupils narrowed as he regarded them. "May we speak?" Kale asked, his deep voice cutting through the quiet. Daniel hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Of course." Kale approached slowly, his movements deliberate and precise. He lowered himself onto the bench across from them, his tail flicking slightly as he settled in. For a few moments, no one spoke. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Kale finally broke it. "You intrigue us, human," he began, his tone measured. "Your kind claims to seek peace, yet your history tells a different story." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He glanced at Rachel, who gave him an encouraging nod, urging him to respond. "We acknowledge our past mistakes," Daniel said carefully. "Not all humans act with malice or greed. Some of us strive for better, to learn, to grow, to repair the harm done." Kale tilted his head, studying him intently. "And yet you come unarmed. Why? Is it arrogance? Or do you believe yourselves above conflict?" "It's neither," Daniel replied, choosing his words with care. "We chose to come unarmed because we wanted to show you something different. Strength doesn't always mean carrying a weapon. Sometimes it means trusting others enough to let your guard down." The Vrin ambassador's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his gaze. Before he could respond, another voice interrupted the conversation. He speaks truthfully. Zir projected telepathically, her thoughts resonating in all three minds simultaneously. She emerged from the shadows, her insectoid form glowing faintly. His words aligned with his emotions. Few species would dare such vulnerability. Kale turned to her, his forked tongue flicking briefly. "Vulnerability is not strength, Zero. It is a liability," perhaps Zira countered. But it is also an opportunity. Humanity's presence here challenges us to reconsider old assumptions. Are we truly ready to dismiss them so icily? Daniel watched the exchange between the two ambassadors, sensing the weight of their debate. These beings represented civilizations, far older and more advanced than Earth's, yet they were divided over humanity's role in the galaxy. It was humbling and daunting to realize how much rested on his ability to navigate this complex web of politics and perception. Rachel leaned forward slightly, addressing both Kale and Zira. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve by questioning us? You want us to prove ourselves? To justify our existence here?" Kale's gaze shifted to her, sharp and unyielding. "We question because uncertainty breeds caution, your kind has shown. Great potential, but also great danger. We must know which side will prevail." Before anyone could respond, Zira interjected. "There is another matter you should be aware of." Her antennae twitched slightly, and her voice carried a note of urgency. The incident near Proxima Centauri still casts a shadow over your reputation. Many delegates view it as proof of humanity's unpredictability, Daniel's heart sank. So the rumors were true. The attack decades ago wasn't just a footnote. In history, it was a scar that refused to heal. He clenched his fists tightly, forcing himself to remain calm. "We condemn that act," he said, his voice steady, despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "It was carried out by a rogue faction, not sanctioned by any government. Humanity has changed since then. We've worked hard to earn trust, to show that we're capable of coexisting peacefully." Cale's eyes narrowed further, though whether in suspicion or contemplation, Daniel couldn't tell. "Change takes time," the Vryn said finally. "Trust even longer. Perhaps your actions in the coming days will sway opinions. Until then, tread carefully." With that, Cale rose to his full height and strode away, his tail swishing behind him. Zira lingered for a moment longer, her multifaceted eyes locking onto Daniel's. "Do not take his words as rejection," she projected gently. Cale values strength above all else, but others see value in your approach. Continue as you have begun, and you may yet succeed. Then she too departed, leaving Daniel and Rachel alone once more. The garden felt quieter now, the weight of the conversation pressing heavily on them. "That could have gone worse," Rachel remarked after a long pause. Daniel exhaled sharply, leaning back against the bench. "Could it, though? They didn't say anything we didn't already suspect. Humanity's past is haunting us, and I don't know if we'll ever fully escape it." "But you heard Zira," Rachel countered. "She sees potential in us. That's something." "Maybe not everyone shares Cale's perspective." "Maybe," Daniel muttered, unconvinced. "Still, it feels like we're walking a tightrope. One wrong step, and everything falls apart." Rachel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That's why we prepare. Learn as much as you can about these species, their cultures, their histories, their motivations. Knowledge is power, even when you don't carry a weapon." Daniel nodded, appreciating her advice. As they sat in silence, gazing at the glowing plants around them, he realized how much he still had to understand. Each species in the Galactic Council was shaped by centuries, even millennia, of evolution, conflict, and cooperation. Humanity, by comparison, was an infant stumbling into a room full of giants. But perhaps that very innocence could become their greatest asset. The next morning, Daniel woke early, determined to make the most of his surroundings, wandered through the bustling corridors of the council building, observing the delegates. As they prepared for the day's sessions, some gathered in clusters, discussing strategies or sharing information. Others moved with purpose, their weapons glinting ominously in the light. One group caught his attention, a trio of amphibious beings from the Taylor delegation. Their sleek, iridescent skin glistened as they conversed in low melodic tones. Curiosity got the better of him, and he approached cautiously. "Excuse me," he said, bowing slightly to show respect. The tallest of the three turned to face him, her large, bulbous eyes blinking slowly. "You are the human delegate," she said, her voice smooth and flowing. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to learn more about your people," Daniel admitted. "Your presentation yesterday was impressive. How do you manage to adapt so well to extreme conditions?" The Taylor exchanged glances, seemingly amused by his interest. "Our survival depends on flexibility," the leader explained. "Water is life for us, and we have learned to harness its properties in countless ways. Whether navigating treacherous currents or enduring harsh climates, we adapt because we must." Daniel listened intently, fascinated by their resilience. "That's incredible. Do you think humanity could benefit from adopting some of your techniques?" The Taylor tilted her head thoughtfully. "Perhaps adaptation requires patience. Rushing the process often leads to failure, or worse, destruction." Her words struck a chord with Daniel. Patience was something he and humanity as a whole would need in abundance if they hoped to thrive among the stars. Thanking the Taylor for their time, he continued his exploration, seeking out other delegates to engage in conversation. By midday, Daniel returned to the council chamber, where preparations for the afternoon session were underway. He found Rachel, waiting for him near their seats, her expression serious. Word's spreading, she said quietly. Some delegates are calling for stricter scrutiny of humanity's inclusion. They argue that allowing us to attend unarmed sets a dangerous precedent. Daniel frowned, feeling the pressure mounting. What can we do to counter that? We stay focused, Rachel replied firmly. Show them that humanity's strengths lie in areas they haven't considered. Diplomacy, innovation, collaboration. Those are the qualities we need to highlight. As the session began, the atmosphere in the chamber felt heavier than before. Discussions grew increasingly contentious, with debates over resource allocation and territorial disputes sparking heated arguments. Tempers flared, and several delegates brandished their weapons in frustration, their gestures sharp and aggressive. Statement. In a room filled with weapons and hostility, being unarmed. Document. Part 1. Daniel Harper stood at the edge of the bustling spaceport, his eyes scanning the horizon where sleek starships gleamed under the artificial sunlight. The air hummed with energy both mechanical and biological as beings from countless worlds moved about their business. It was overwhelming for someone who had spent most of his life on Earth, but Daniel tried to keep his composure. Today was not just any day. It was the beginning of something monumental. A soft chime sounded in his earpiece, signaling an incoming message. Tapped the side of his head lightly to activate the communication link. Harper came a familiar voice, calm yet tinged with urgency. It was Dr. Laura Bennett, his mentor, and one of the few people he trusted implicitly. "Daniel, are you ready?" she asked, her tone serious. "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied, though his stomach churned with nerves. He adjusted. The strap of the small satchel slung over his shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily upon him. "You're representing humanity today," Laura reminded him. "Remember what we've talked about? Every move you make, every word you say matters. This isn't just about you or me. It's about all of us." Daniel nodded even though she couldn't see him. "I know. I won't let you down." Laura hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There's one more thing. You'll notice that every other delegate attending the Galactic Council chambers will be armed. Weapons are practically part of their culture, but humans, ... We're different. We've been given permission to enter unarmed." "Hey, why is that?" Daniel interrupted, curiosity getting the better of him. He had wondered about this rule since learning of his assignment. "It's complicated," Laura said, choosing her words carefully. "Let's just say there's history, that makes some species uneasy around us. For now, trust that this decision serves a purpose. Just focus on staying calm and showing them why humanity deserves a seat at the table." Before Daniel could ask anything else, the connection ended abruptly. Sighing, he turned his attention back to the spaceport. A sleek shuttlecraft hovered nearby, its surface reflecting the light like liquid silver. Its design was unmistakably alien. Smooth curves and glowing panels replaced the clunky utilitarian look of human spacecraft. Two figures emerged from the craft, their forms unmistakably non-human. The first was tall, nearly 7 feet, with shimmering green scales covering its body. Its slit-like pupils scanned the area with sharp precision, and its movements were deliberate, almost serpentine. This was Kale, ambassador of the Vrina, reptilian species known for their fierce loyalty and strategic minds. Beside Kale stood Zira, whose appearance was equally striking. Her exoskeleton glistened faintly, segmented limbs clicking softly as she walked. Unlike Kale, Zira communicated telepathically, her thoughts resonating directly within Daniel's mind without uttering a single sound. "We meet at last," Zira projected into his thoughts, her mental voice smooth and melodic. "I have heard much about your kind, and I about yours," Daniel responded aloud, bowing slightly out of respect. "It's an honor to finally meet you both." Kale tilted his head, studying Daniel intently. "Your species is peculiar," he said, his voice deep and raspy. "You come unarmed, yet you claim to seek peace. Such contradictions intrigue us." Daniel forced a smile, though his heart raced. "Peace doesn't require weapons," he replied. "Sometimes it requires courage instead. Zira's antennae twitched slightly, as if amused by his response. Asterisk, perhaps. Or perhaps it requires foolishness. She paused, then added, Time will tell. Which trait defines your kind? Asterisk, before Daniel could respond, another figure approached them. She was human, her dark hair tied neatly into a bun, and her posture radiated confidence. Rachel Myers extended her hand toward Daniel. You must be Daniel Harper, she said warmly. I'm Rachel Myers, your fellow delegate. We'll be working closely during the summit. Pleasure to meet you, Daniel said, shaking her hand firmly. There was something reassuring about seeing another human face amidst the sea of aliens. Rachel glanced briefly at Kale and Zero before lowering her voice. Listen, I know this whole unarmed thing has got you worried. Trust me, I felt the same way when I first arrived. But remember, they're watching us. Everything we do, everything we say's being judged. So stay sharp, okay? Daniel nodded, grateful for her advice. Together, the group boarded the shuttlecraft, its interior bathed in a soft blue glow. Seats molded themselves to accommodate each passenger's unique physiology, ensuring maximum comfort despite their differences. As the craft ascended gracefully into the sky, Daniel pressed his forehead against the transparent window, gazing. Down at the sprawling metropolis below, XY-7 was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering spires stretched high into the atmosphere, their surfaces adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of view. Streets teemed with activity, filled with creatures of every imaginable shape and size. Some walked upright, while others floated effortlessly above the ground, propelled by unseen forces. The sheer diversity of life astounded him, and for a brief moment, Daniel forgot his anxiety. But reality quickly returned as the shuttle docked at the council chambers. Stepping out onto the platform, Daniel was struck by the grandeur of the structure before him. The building resembled a colossal crystal, its facets refracting light in dazzling arrays of color. Guards stationed at the entrance wore uniforms bearing the insignia of various galactic powers, their weapons gleaming ominously as they entered the main hall. Daniel noticed how every delegate carried some form of armament, swords forged from unknown metals hung at hips, pistols strapped to thighs, and even staffs crackling with latent energy were held casually in hands. Yet none of these individuals appeared hostile. Rather, their weapons seemed extensions of themselves, symbols of identity and authority. Daniel swallowed hard, acutely aware of his own lack of defense. His fingers brushed against the fabric of his jacket pocket, seeking reassurance from the absence of weight. He caught Rachel's eye, silently asking if she shared his unease. Her expression remained composed, though he detected a flicker of tension in her gaze. Moments later, a protocol officer ushered them toward their designated seats. The chamber itself was vast, circular in design, with tiers rising steeply to accommodate hundreds of delegates. At the center stood a podium encircled by holographic displays projecting data streams in multiple languages. Above, a translucent dome allowed natural light to filter through, casting shifting shadows across the room. As Daniel took his place, he couldn't help but feel exposed. Surrounding him were beings capable of unimaginable feats, each carrying tools of destruction. And here he sat, empty-handed, relying solely on words and reason to navigate this foreign world. When the session began, each species presented itself in turn, showcasing their might and prowess. Weapons were displayed proudly, accompanied by demonstrations of power energy blasts, fired harmlessly into shields, blades slicing through solid objects with ease. Applause erupted after each performance, a cacophony of cheers and clicks, and roars that reverberated through the chamber. Finally, it was humanity's turn. All eyes turned to Daniel as he rose slowly from his seat. Silence fell over the room, heavy with anticipation. He cleared his throat, steadying himself before addressing the assembly. "My name is Daniel Harper, representative of Earth," he began, his voice steady, despite the pounding in his chest. "Unlike many here, I come before you unarmed, not because we lack strength, but because we believe true power lies not in weapons, but in understanding. Humanity seeks not domination, but cooperation. Together, we can build a future where fear gives way to trust, and conflict yields to collaboration. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, scattered applause broke out, hesitant at first, but growing louder as others joined in. Daniel allowed himself a small smile, knowing he had taken the first step toward proving humanity's worth. Yet deep down, he understood that this was only the beginning. The real challenges lay ahead, lurking beneath the surface of diplomacy and hidden agendas. But for now, he had succeeded in capturing the galaxy's attention, and perhaps its respect. Document. Part 2. The applause faded slowly, leaving behind an uneasy silence in the council chamber. Daniel Harper sat down, his heart still racing from the weight of the moment. He glanced at Rachel Myers, who gave him a subtle nod of approval. Her expression was calm, but her fingers drummed lightly against the armrest, a sign that she, too, felt the tension in the room. Around them, the other delegates resumed their conversations, some speaking aloud while others communicated through gestures or telepathic exchanges. Daniel noticed Kale, the reptilian ambassador, leaning toward Zira, the insectoid delegate. Their discussions seemed intense, though he couldn't hear what they were saying. Occasionally one of them would glance in his direction, their expressions unreadable. Rachel leaned closer to Daniel, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You did well," she said, "but don't let your guard down. This is just the opening act. The real test will come later." "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice low. Rachel hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "These species, they're not like us. They don't operate on trust alone. Every move we make will be scrutinized. And remember, most of them have been here for decades, even centuries. They know how this game works. We're the outsiders, and outsiders always draw suspicion." Daniel nodded, absorbing her words. He had known coming into this summit that humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Council was controversial. But hearing Rachel spell it out made it feel more real. The thought unsettled him, but he pushed the feeling aside. Now wasn't the time to dwell on doubts. As the session continued, Daniel took the opportunity to observe the other delegates more closely. Each species brought its own unique presence to the chamber. Some, like Kale, exuded confidence and authority, their weapons gleaming prominently as if daring anyone to challenge them. Dard, like a group of amphibious beings seated several rows away, seemed almost indifferent, their movements fluid and unhurried. There was also a contingent of robotic entities whose metallic frames reflected the light in sharp angles. They didn't speak, instead communicating through bursts of data projected onto nearby screens. Despite their differences, there was one thing all these species had in common: power. Whether it came from advanced technology, physical strength, or sheer numbers, each delegate represented a civilization capable of wielding immense force. Yet, none of them appeared openly hostile at least not yet. It was as if they existed in a delicate balance, where aggression was restrained by mutual fear. Daniel found himself wondering how humanity fit into this equation. Without weapons or obvious displays of dominance, what did Earth have to offer? Was it enough to rely on diplomacy and goodwill, as he had suggested earlier? Or was there something deeper at play, something Laura Bennett had hinted at during their conversation? Before he could dwell on the question further, the protocol officer announced a recess. Delegates began rising from their seats, breaking off into smaller groups to discuss matters privately. Daniel watched as Kale and Zira moved toward a corner of the chamber, their heads bent together in quiet conversation. Curiosity tugged at him, and before he realized it, he was standing up. "Where are you going?" Rachel whispered sharply, grabbing his sleeve. "I just want to see what they're talking about," Daniel replied, trying to sound casual. "It might give us some insight." Rachel sighed but released her grip. "Be careful. Don't make it obvious you're eavesdropping." Daniel nodded and casually strolled toward the edge of the chamber, pretending to examine one of the holographic displays. From this position, he could overhear snippets of Kale and Zara's discussion without drawing attention. "They're unpredictable," Kale was saying, his raspy voice barely audible over the hum of the chamber. "Their history is ... troubling," Syrah clicked her mandibles softly in response. Indeed, she projected telepathically, her thoughts spilling unintentionally into Daniel's mind. Asterisk, the incident near Proxima Centauri left scars that have yet to heal. Many still view them as a threat. Asterisk, Kale tilted his head, his slit-like pupils narrowing. And yet, they come unarmed. What does that mean? Is it arrogance, naivety, or something else entirely? Daniel froze, his breath catching in his throat. Incident. What incident? He wanted to ask, to demand answers, but doing so would reveal that he had been listening. Instead, he forced himself to stay calm and pretend he hadn't heard anything. Unusual. Rachel appeared beside him moments later, her brow furrowed with concern. You look pale, she said quietly. What happened? I overheard something, Daniel admitted, keeping his voice low. They mentioned an incident near Proxima Centauri. You know what they're talking about? Rachel's expression darkened. She grabbed his arm and pulled him away from the crowd, leading him to a secluded alcove near the entrance of the chamber. Once they were alone, she turned to face him, her eyes serious. There's something you need to know, she said. Years ago, before humanity officially joined interstellar society, a rogue faction from Earth attacked an alien convoy near Proxima Centauri. It was a small group, not sanctioned by any government, but the damage was done. Several ships were destroyed, and lives were lost. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Why haven't I heard about this before? I guess it's classified, Rachel explained. Only a handful of people outside diplomatic circles know the full story. Humanity apologized publicly and condemned the attack, but the damage to our reputation was significant. That's why we're treated differently here. Trust takes time to rebuild, especially when lives are at stake. Daniel sank onto a nearby bench, his mind reeling. No wonder the other species viewed humans with suspicion. But why hadn't anyone prepared him for this? How was he supposed to navigate such a minefield without knowing the full context? Rachel sat beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. I'm telling you this now because you need to understand what we're up against. These beings aren't just judging you based on today's performance. They're judging all of us based on our past actions. Your job is to show them that humanity has changed, that we're ready to contribute positively to the galaxy. But how? Daniel asked, frustration creeping into his voice. How can I prove that when I don't even have the full picture? You focus on what you do know, Rachel said firmly. You represent hope, resilience, and the willingness to learn. It's what got us invited here in the first place. Stick to those values, and you'll be fine. Her words offered some comfort, but Daniel couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. As they returned to the main hall, he noticed Kale watching him intently. The reptilian ambassador's gaze was piercing, as if he knew exactly what Daniel had overheard. For a brief moment, Daniel considered approaching him to address the issue directly. But Rachel subtly shook her head, warning him against it. Instead, Daniel decided to focus on building connections with other delegates. Over the next hour, he introduced himself to representatives from various species, asking questions about their cultures and traditions. He learned that the amphibious beings were called the Tailor, known for their mastery of aquatic environments and their ability to adapt to extreme conditions. The robotic entities, referred to as the Synthery, were artificial intelligences created by a long-extinct civilization, serving as guardians of ancient knowledge. Each interaction helped ease Daniel's nerves, reminding him that despite their differences, these beings shared a common goal: survival and prosperity in a vast, unpredictable universe. Still, the shadow of humanity's past loomed large, casting doubt on whether true acceptance was possible. When the recess ended and the delegates reconvened, Daniel returned to his seat with renewed determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he vowed to face them head-on. Humanity's future depended on it. As the session resumed, another delegate stepped forward to present their credentials. This time, it was a representative from the Vryn Kale's species. The ambassador held aloft a ceremonial blade, its edge glowing faintly with energy. With a swift motion, he sliced through a thick metal rod placed before him, demonstrating the weapon's precision and power. Cheers erupted from the audience, followed by enthusiastic applause. Daniel watched silently, acutely aware of the contrast between the Vrin's display and his own earlier speech. While the Vrin relied on tangible symbols of strength, humanity's message had been rooted in ideals, abstract concepts that required faith rather than proof. Would that be enough to sway the council? Only time would tell. For now, Daniel resolved to remain vigilant, observing, and learning as much as he could. The path ahead was uncertain, but he refused to let fear dictate his actions. Humanity had taken its first step into the galactic arena, and Daniel Harper was determined to ensure it wouldn't falter. Document. Part 3. The council chamber buzzed with anticipation as the next phase of the session began. The grand hall, already filled with the hum of alien voices and the occasional clink of metallic armor or energy weapons, grew quieter as the protocol officer announced the ceremonial opening of the Galactic Council Summit. Delegates settled into their seats, adjusting their postures to project confidence and authority. For Daniel Harper, seated among representatives from countless worlds, the moment felt surreal. At the center of the chamber stood a massive holographic display, its surface shimmering like liquid silver. It served as the focal point for the proceedings, projecting images and data streams that translated into every species' native language. Above it hung a translucent dome, allowing natural light to filter through and cast shifting patterns across the room. The effect was mesmerizing, but Daniel forced himself to focus. This wasn't just a spectacle, it was humanity's chance to prove itself. The first order of business was the presentation of credentials. Each species took turns stepping up to the podium, showcasing not only their diplomatic status but also their strength and resolve. Kale, the reptilian ambassador, went first. His movements were deliberate, his posture radiating power. He held aloft a ceremonial blade, its edge glowing faintly with energy. With a swift motion, he sliced through a thick metal rod placed before him, demonstrating the weapon's precision and lethality. Cheers erupted from the audience, followed by enthusiastic applause. Next came Zira, the insectoid delegate. She approached the podium gracefully, her segmented limbs clicking softly against the floor. Instead of a physical weapon, she extended one of her forelimbs, which transformed into a pulsating beam of light. The beam struck a nearby target, disintegrating it instantly. Her demonstration elicited gasps of admiration from the crowd, though. Daniel noticed that some delegates, particularly those seated near the aesthetis, robotic entities, watched her with cautious expressions. One by one, the other species followed suit. A delegation of amphibious beings known as the Tailors showcased their mastery of aquatic environments by manipulating water currents within a contained sphere, creating intricate shapes and patterns. The Synthri, robotic guardians of ancient knowledge, displayed their computational prowess by solving complex equations in mere seconds, their metallic frames glowing faintly as they processed information. Even the smaller, less prominent species found ways to assert their presence, whether through displays of physical strength, technological ingenuity, or cultural achievements. Throughout these presentations, Daniel sat quietly, observing everything. Each demonstration reinforced the unspoken truth about the Galactic Council. Power was currency here. Weapons, abilities, and resources were not just tools, they were symbols of identity and influence. And yet, despite the undeniable tension, in the room, no one attacked. Every species seemed bound by an unwritten code, where aggression was deterred by mutual fear and respect. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Daniel rose slowly from his seat, his heart pounding in his chest. All eyes turned to him, and for a brief moment, he felt utterly exposed. Unlike the others, he carried nothing, no weapon, no artifact, no visible sign of strength. His hands were empty, and his jacket pockets contained nothing more than a small notebook and pen. Yet as he stepped forward, he reminded himself of Rachel's words, humanity's greatest asset wasn't what it carried, but what it represented. Reaching the podium, Daniel paused to take a deep breath. The holographic display shifted, projecting Earth's image of blue-green orbs suspended in the vastness of space. He glanced at the screen briefly before addressing the assembly. "My name is Daniel Harper," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves coursing through him. "I stand before you today as a representative of Earth, a planet still young in its journey among the stars. We are newcomers to this council, and we acknowledge that our arrival has sparked questions and concerns. Let me assure you of one thing. Humanity's decision to come unarmed is not a sign of weakness. It is a declaration of faith in ourselves, in each other, and in the possibility of peace." A murmur rippled through the chamber, though Daniel couldn't tell if it was skepticism or curiosity. Ignoring it, he continued, "We understand that trust must be earned, especially when history casts shadows over intentions. We know that mistakes have been made and wounds run deep. But we believe that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the willingness to build, to listen, to work together, toward solutions that benefit all, not just a few." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, pointing to the hologram of Earth, he added, "This planet is our home, but it is also a reminder of what we can achieve when we choose cooperation over conflict. From the depths of our oceans to the peaks of our mountains, humanity has learned to adapt, to innovate, and to survive. We bring those lessons here, not as conquerors, but as partners." For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. The delegates exchanged glances, some nodding thoughtfully, while others remained impassive. Finally, scattered applause broke out, hesitant at first, but growing louder as more beings joined in. Daniel allowed himself a small smile, knowing he had taken another step toward proving humanity's worth. Returning to his seat, he felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. Rachel leaned close, whispering encouragement. "That was good," she said. "You handled yourself well." "Thanks," Daniel replied, though his mind was racing. Had he done enough? Would his words resonate with beings who measured strength in tangible terms? As the session progressed, the atmosphere shifted slightly. While earlier presentations had been met with enthusiastic applause, humanity's unarmed stance seemed to provoke deeper reflection. Some delegates whispered amongst themselves, their tones speculative rather than dismissive. Others watched Daniel intently, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. During a brief recess, Daniel decided to explore the chamber further. He wandered toward the edges of the room, where smaller groups of delegates gathered to discuss matters privately. Away from the formalities of the main session, conversations flowed more freely. Daniel listened carefully, picking up fragments of dialogue that hinted at the complexities of galactic politics. Nearby, two amphibious delegates argued over resource allocation in contested star systems. Their voices were low and melodic, punctuated by occasional splashes as they gestured with webbed hands. Elsewhere, a group of robotic entities debated the ethics of artificial intelligence, their mechanical voices blending into a rhythmic hum. Even Kale and Zero were engaged in quiet conversation. Their discussion focused on the implications of humanity's inclusion in the council. Daniel hesitated, debating whether to approach them. Before he could decide, a new voice interrupted his thoughts. "You're brave, coming here without weapons?" Turning, he saw a tall, slender figure standing beside him. Her skin shimmered faintly, iridescent like oil on water, and her eyes glowed. With an inner light, she introduced herself as Nira, an envoy from a species called the Luminaris, known for their bioluminescent features and empathic abilities. The Luminaris were often regarded as mediators in interstellar disputes. "Brave. Or foolish," Daniel admitted with a wry smile. "Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." Nira tilted her head, studying him with curiosity. "Your kind fascinates us. You lack the physical advantages of many species here, yet you've thrived. How do you explain that?" Daniel considered her question carefully. "I think it's because we adapt. When we face challenges, we find ways to overcome them. Not always through force, but through creativity and determination. That's what defines us." Nira nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps that's why the council allowed you to attend unarmed, to see if your ideals hold weight in a room full of weapons." Her words lingered in Daniel's mind long after she excused herself to join another conversation. Was that truly the reason behind humanity's disarmament? If so, it raised unsettling questions. What would happen if humanity failed to live up to expectations? And how could they succeed when the odds seemed stacked against them? When the session reconvened, the focus shifted to broader topics, including trade agreements and territorial disputes. Discussions grew heated at times, with tempers flaring and accusations flying. During one particularly tense exchange, a burly delegate from a warrior race slammed his fist on the table, causing several smaller beings to recoil in alarm. Energy blades hummed ominously, and plasma rifles charged with barely restrained hostility. Yet, amidst the chaos, Daniel noticed something remarkable. No one attacked. Despite the palpable anger and frustration, every species seemed restrained by an invisible barrier shared. Understanding that violence would destabilize the fragile balance holding the council together. It was a paradoxical dance of power and restraint, where aggression was both omnipresent and forbidden. As the day drew to a close, the protocol officer announced the conclusion of the session. Delegates rose from their seats, stretching or adjusting their attire as they prepared to leave. Daniel stayed seated for a moment longer, watching the exodus with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Humanity had survived its first day in the Galactic council chambers, but the road ahead promised to be far more challenging. Rachel appeared beside him, placing a reassuring document. Part 5. The next morning dawned with a strange mix of calm and tension in the air. Daniel Harper woke early, his mind already racing with thoughts of the day ahead. The weight of humanity's fragile position in the Galactic Council pressed heavily on him, but he refused to let it paralyze him. Instead, he focused on what he could control: his actions, his words, and his resolve. After a quick breakfast in the dining hall, a room filled with the hum of alien conversations and the clinking of utensils against plates, Daniel made his way back to the council chamber. Along the way, he passed groups of delegates engaged in lively discussions. Some argued passionately over resource allocations, while others exchanged dry remarks about trade agreements. Weapons gleamed at their sides, reminders of the latent power each species carried into the room. Rachel Myers caught up with him as he neared the entrance. "Ready for round 2? She asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied, forcing a smile. He appreciated Rachel's presence. Her steady demeanor helped ground him when doubt crept in. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Delegates took their seats, adjusting their weapons or straightening their attire as they prepared for another day of deliberations. The holographic display at the center of the room flickered to life, projecting maps of contested star systems and data streams detailing disputed resources. It was clear that today's session would focus on some of the most contentious issues facing the council, as the protocol officer called the meeting to order. Daniel noticed subtle shifts in the dynamics of the room. Kale, the reptilian ambassador, sat rigidly in his seat, his tail twitching slightly, a sign of agitation. Zira, the insectoid delegate, clicked her mandibles softly, her antennae swiveling, as if tuning into the emotions of those around her. Even the robotic synthery seemed more alert than usual, her metallic frames glowing faintly with activity. The first topic of discussion centered on a cluster of mineral-rich planets located near the edge of the galaxy. Several species claimed ownership of the region, citing historical treaties and exploration records as evidence. Tempers flared quickly, with accusations flying across the chamber. "This is ridiculous," bellowed a burly delegate representing the Graxian species, slamming his fist onto the table. His massive frame loomed over the podium, and the energy blades strapped to his hip crackled ominously. "Our ancestors discovered these worlds centuries ago. They belong to us. It's not so fast," countered a sleek, feline-like ambassador from the Faloran delegation. Her voice was smooth but laced with menace. "Your claims are based on outdated maps. We have newer data proving our prior settlement." The argument escalated rapidly, with other delegates chiming in to support one side or the other. Energy weapons charged audibly, and several beings drew their blades, pointing them threateningly at their opponents. The room buzzed with hostility, a delicate balance of power teetering precariously. Daniel watched in alarm as the situation spiraled out of control. He glanced at Rachel, who gave him a slight shake of her head, warning him to stay silent for her. Now. But as the shouting grew louder and the weapons more prominent, Daniel realized that someone needed to intervene before things turned violent. Standing abruptly, raised his hand to signal for attention. At first, no one noticed him amid the chaos. Undeterred, he stepped forward, positioning himself near the central display. Finally, his movement caught the eye of a nearby delegate who nudged Cale. Slowly, the noise began to subside as curious. Glances turned toward Daniel. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but calm. "I understand how important these resources are to all of you, but resorting to threats won't solve anything. If we keep escalating like this, none of us will benefit, not even those who claim ownership." A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates looked intrigued, while others appeared skeptical. Cale tilted his head, studying Daniel intently, his slit-like pupils narrowing. "And what do you propose, human?" Cale asked, his deep voice cutting through the lingering tension. "You offer no solutions, only empty words." Daniel hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Maybe my words aren't enough on their own," he admitted. "But I believe there's value in stepping back and looking at the bigger picture. These planets don't belong to any one species. They're part of something greater. Instead of fighting over them, why not work together to share the resources? Cooperation doesn't mean weakness. It means finding a way to ensure everyone benefits." His suggestion was met with a mix of reactions. Some delegates nodded thoughtfully, while others scoffed openly. A representative from the amphibious tailor species raised a webbed hand, drawing the group's attention. "The human raises an interesting point," the tailor said, her melodic voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "Conflict drains resources. Faster than cooperation, perhaps a joint effort could yield better results for all parties involved." Before anyone could respond, the Faloran ambassador hissed angrily. "Sharing is for the weak. Our strength lies in taking what we deserve." The Graxian delegate growled in agreement, flexing his muscular arms. "If sharing means giving up what is rightfully ours, then count us out." Tensions flared again, and several beings drew their weapons fully, the threat of violence palpable. Daniel felt a surge of panic but forced himself to remain composed. He glanced at Rachel, who gave him an encouraging nod, urging him to continue. "Think about it," Daniel pressed on, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the rising din. "Every second we spend arguing is a second wasted. While we fight, those resources sit unused, decaying or being claimed by outside forces. Is that really what any of you want?" His words seemed to resonate with a few delegates, particularly the smaller species who lacked the military might to compete directly. One of the robotic synthery emitted a series of clicks and whirs, translating into a statement projected onto the holographic display. "Asterisk efficiency is paramount. Conflict reduces productivity." Asterisk even Zira appeared to soften slightly, her antennae twitching as she processed the idea. "Perhaps compromise is worth exploring," she projected telepathically, her thoughts rippling through the minds of those nearby. Cale, however, remained unconvinced. "Compromise requires trust," he said sharply, "and trust cannot be built overnight. Your kind has proven unreliable in the past." The jab stung, but Daniel didn't let it show. Trust isn't given freely, it's earned. And if humanity wants to earn yours, we need opportunities to prove ourselves. Let us contribute to solving problems like this one. Show us that working together is possible. For a long moment, silence fell over the chamber. The delegates exchanged uncertain glances, weighing Daniel's proposal against their own desires. Finally, the protocol officer stepped forward, attempting to restore order. "Let us consider the human's suggestion," the officer announced diplomatically. "Further discussion can continue after a brief recess." As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Daniel sank into his seat, exhaling deeply. Rachel leaned close, patting his shoulder. "That was bold," she said. "Do you think it worked?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but at least I tried." Nothing else. Maybe it planted a seed. During the recess, Daniel wandered outside once more, seeking solace in the garden. To his surprise, he found Nira, the Luminaris envoy, seated on a bench beneath a glowing tree. Her iridescent skin shimmered softly in the dim light, and her bioluminescent features cast a gentle aura around her. "You handled yourself well in there," Nira said, as Daniel approached. "Not many would dare challenge such aggression." "I wasn't trying to challenge anyone," Daniel replied, sitting beside her. "I just wanted to remind them that fighting solves nothing. Sometimes stepping back is the bravest thing you can do." Nira nodded slowly, her luminous eyes reflecting admiration. "Bravery comes in many forms. Yours may yet inspire change." Their conversation drifted to broader topics, including the challenges of interstellar diplomacy and the complexities of building trust among diverse species. Nira shared stories of her own people, emphasizing the importance of empathy and understanding in bridging divides. When the session reconvened, the mood in the chamber had shifted slightly. While tensions still simmered, the earlier hostility had diminished. Discussions resumed, though debates remained heated. Over the course of the afternoon, progress was slow but steady. Several smaller species formed tentative alliances, agreeing to explore shared use of the contested planets. Larger delegations like the Graxians and Fellerins remained resistant, but cracks began to form in their rigid stances. As the day drew to a close, Daniel reflected on the events. Humanity's unarmed status continued to draw mixed reactions, but his willingness to advocate for peace had earned him a measure of respect. For the first time since arriving on Zelo 7, he allowed himself a small spark of hope. Rachel joined him as they left the chamber, her expression thoughtful. "You're making an impact," she said. "People are starting to see that humanity has something to offer besides apologies and explanations." Daniel smiled faintly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "We're here to prove that peace isn't naive, it's necessary. And if we can convince even a few of them, then maybe we're on the right path." Together they walked back to their quarters, the stars above us. Document Part 6. The days blurred together for Daniel Harper as the Galactic Council Summit continued. Each session brought new challenges, debates spiraling into heated arguments, and alliances forming or fracturing with unnerving speed. Humanity's presence remained a point of contention, but Daniel's earlier efforts to propose compromise had planted seeds of curiosity among some delegates. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something larger loomed on the horizons, something unspoken, yet deeply significant. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Daniel found himself wandering the quiet corridors of the council building. The halls were dimly lit, the hum of distant conversations fading into silence. He needed time to think, to process everything he'd seen and heard. As he turned a corner, he noticed a flicker of movement ahead. It was Zira, the insectoid ambassador, standing near an open doorway that led to a secluded terrace. "Daniel," she projected telepathically, her voice soft and melodic in his mind. "I've been waiting for you." Surprised, Daniel hesitated before approaching. "Waiting for me? Why?" Zira tilted her head, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the faint light from the stars beyond the terrace. "There is much you do not yet understand," she began. Your species has intrigued many here not because of your ideals, though they are admirable, because of your choice to remain unarmed. I thought that was just protocol," Daniel replied cautiously. "A precaution to ease tensions. It is. More than that, Zira countered. It is a test." "A test?" Daniel echoed, his heart skipping a beat. "What kind of test?" Zira clicked her mandibles softly, a gesture Daniel was beginning to recognize as contemplation. The council operates under a delicate balance of power. Weapons are symbols of authority, tools of deterrence, yet humanity arrives without them, choosing vulnerability over defense. This puzzles many delegates, including Kale. Daniel frowned, recalling the reptilian ambassador's earlier skepticism. "So what does this test mean? Are we being judged based on whether we survive these sessions without incident?" "In part, yes," Zero admitted. But there's more. Council believes that true strength lies not in weapons, but in restraint and wisdom. By coming unarmed, you challenge their assumptions about power. They watch closely to see if humanity can navigate conflict without resorting to aggression. Asterisk, the weight of her words settled heavily on Daniel, and if we fail, failure would confirm their fears that humanity is unpredictable, incapable of coexisting peacefully. Zira paused, her antennae twitching slightly. But success could change how the galaxy views Earth forever. Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. That's a lot of pressure, indeed, Zero agreed. Asterisk, yet it is also an opportunity. Few species are given such a chance to redefine themselves. Your actions here will shape humanity's legacy among the stars. Asterisk, before Daniel could respond, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Turning, he saw Rachel Myers approaching, her expression wary. Daniel, there you are. I've been looking for you. Was just talking to Zira, Daniel explained, gesturing toward the insectoid ambassador. She was explaining something important. Rachel glanced at Zira, her brow furrowing slightly. Important enough to share now? Zira nodded. Asterisk, yes. Humanities. Disarmament is not merely a condition of entry, it is a deliberate challenge. To succeed, you must demonstrate qualities that transcend physical strength, patience, diplomacy, and trustworthiness. Asterisk, Rachel absorbed this information quietly, her gaze thoughtful. We suspected as much, she admitted, but hearing it confirmed changes things. We'll need to adjust our approach moving forward. Adjust how? Daniel asked, turning to her. Rachel crossed her arms, thinking carefully. We've been focusing on proving humanity's value through ideas and words. That's still important, but now we know we're being actively tested. Every move we make matters not just to sway opinions, but to pass judgment. Daniel nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. So we double down on diplomacy. Show them that humanity's greatest strength isn't what we carry, but who we are. Precisely, Rachel said firmly. And remember, you're not alone in this. We'll work together to navigate whatever comes next. Zira stepped back slightly, her glowing form casting soft shadows on the walls. You have allies among us? She projected gently. Asterisk. Not all delegates view humanity as a threat. Trust those who extend goodwill, and be cautious of those who seek to undermine you. Asterisk with that, she turned and disappeared into the darkness. Leaving Daniel and Rachel alone on the terrace, the night sky stretched endlessly above them, dotted with countless stars. For a moment neither spoke, each lost in their thoughts. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. This complicates things, but it also gives us clarity. Knowing the rules of the game means we can play smarter. Daniel nodded, feeling a mix of determination and trepidation. Yeah, let's just hope we're up to the task. The following morning, the council chamber buzzed with energy as delegates prepared for another round of discussions. Today's agenda focused on security protocols within contested regions, a topic guaranteed to ignite passions. Daniel took his seat beside Rachel, his mind replaying Zira's revelation. Every glance, every comment, seemed loaded with hidden meaning now. As the session began, Kale rose to address the assembly. His deep voice carried across the room as he outlined a proposal for increased patrols in disputed territories. Must be maintained, he declared, his tail flicking sharply behind him. Without proper enforcement, chaos will spread. Several delegates nodded in agreement, while others exchanged skeptical looks. A representative from the amphibious tailor species raised a webbed hand. Increased patrols require resources and trust. How do we ensure fairness in deployment? Kale's slit-like pupils narrowed. Fairness is irrelevant when survival is at stake. Strength ensures stability. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Kale's stance was aggressive, bordering on confrontational. If left unchecked, it could escalate tensions further. Leaning toward Rachel, he whispered, "We should say something." Rachel nodded subtly, signaling her support. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stood, drawing the attention of the chamber. "Strength isn't always the answer," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves coursing through him. Patrolling contested areas might seem like a solution, but it risks turning disputes into conflicts. Instead, why not focus on communication? Establish channels where grievances can be addressed before they escalate. Cale turned his piercing gaze on Daniel, his forked tongue flicking briefly. Communication is futile when parties refuse to listen. Your proposal assumes goodwill exists where none may be found. It assumes potential, Daniel countered. We start by assuming hostility, then hostility is all we'll create. But if we assume the possibility of understanding, we open doors to resolution. Several delegates murmured in agreement, including Nira, the Luminaris envoy, who nodded approvingly. Even Zira's antennae twitched slightly, indicating approval. Hale, however, remained unconvinced. You speak of potential, he said sharply. But potential means nothing without action. Words are hollow unless backed by force. Daniel clenched his fists tightly beneath the table, resisting the urge to argue further. Instead, he met Cale's gaze directly. Force divides, understanding unites. Which do you think will bring lasting peace? The chamber fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, unexpectedly, a robotic synthery delegate emitted a series of clicks and whirs, translating into a statement projected onto the central display. Asterisk analysis suggests communication yields higher success rates than enforcement and resolving disputes. Asterisk, a ripple of murmurs spread through the room as delegates processed the synthery's input. Some appeared surprised, while others nodded thoughtfully. Cale's tail twitched irritably, but he said nothing. Seizing the opportunity, Daniel pressed on. Let's try something different. Form a committee dedicated to mediating disputes in contested regions. Include representatives from all sides, not just the strongest voices, but also the quieter ones. Together we can find solutions that benefit everyone. Rachel leaned forward slightly, adding her support. Humanity volunteers to assist in organizing this initiative. We may lack weapons, but we offer collaboration and creativity. The suggestion sparked a flurry of discussion, with several smaller delegations expressing interest. Even the Taylor representative seemed intrigued, her melodic voice carrying clearly as she proposed specific roles for her people. While larger factions like the Graxians and Fellerins remained resistant, cracks began to form in their opposition. As the session drew to a close, Daniel returned to his seat, exhaustion mingling with a sense of accomplishment. Rachel gave him a small smile. That was risky, but it paid off. You're starting to win them over. Not all of them, Daniel admitted, glancing at Cale, who sat rigidly in his seat, his expression unreadable, but maybe enough to make a difference. Placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. That's all we can ask for, one step at a time. Outside the chamber, the stars twinkled brightly, reminding Daniel of the vastness of the galaxy and the enormity of the task ahead. Humanity's journey. Among the stars was fraught with challenges, but for the first time, he truly believed they could rise to meet them.